the man of mystery himself, Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI, Too Much Information. It comes on immediately after the show at 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. with the woman of the hour, Manila Chan, the greatest person alive, short of myself. How you doing, Ted? You doing all right this morning? I was trying to figure out how to close that. Where's it going? How you doing, man?
You were out on a branch there. I'm good. I'm cold. How about you?
Yes, it is freezing here. And I'm supposed to be in DC, where I know it's going to be brutally cold for the inauguration. Caleb is having an event in DC. And what Caleb is trying to do, and I applaud him for this. A lot of people get Caleb wrong, Caleb Maupin. Some of the stuff they say about him, the guy's a communist. And they're like, oh, he's a fascist. He's a Trump supporter. He's this, he's that. He's none of those things. Caleb is just one of those people who say, if Donald Trump is saying that he wants to end wars, not start them, then we should applaud him for that. And we should push him on that. Basically, push him on the thing that he said he's going to do that's positive. I agree with him on it. And so the event is effectively pointing out, let's have this kind of world peace. If he wants to make peace with Kim Jong-un, we should back him on that. If he wants to end the Ukraine war, we should back him on that. If he wants to pull our troops out of Syria, we should back him on that. Like, all of these things are within the context that Donald Trump himself set, and we should applaud him for those things. I mean, hell, he's not even in office yet and got Netanyahu to accept the deal that Netanyahu rejected over the past year. So we'll see. We will see. What are you thinking of this inauguration, though? Give me your thoughts. Are you panicky? Are you more zen than you thought you'd be? What are your thoughts?
I never expected to be panicky, and I'm not, and I'm as zen as can be. I mean, I think I may be there's a Venn diagram between Ted Rall and like normie Democrats, which is basically the uncertainty principle. Like, we just don't know what the next year, forget about the next 4 years, are going to look like. And there's a lot of factors that nobody talks about. But like, again, we have a guy who's becoming president at a very advanced age, 78 years old. He will be he will beat Biden. He will be even older than Biden if he finishes his term. So he will set the record there. What is that going to look like? What is this team? Will all of his advisors be nominated? I'm thinking particularly of Tulsi and RFK. Those are the two I really want to see confirmed. And then there's if not, then what do we get instead? What will the midterms look like? I'm very skeptical about the prospects of success for the ceasefire long term, going past 42 days out or whatever it is into phase 2. I'm like, I don't see how that works. Crossing fingers for the people of Gaza and the West Bank and for the people of Israel, that works out. But, so uncertainty, what is fear, right? Fear is derived from uncertainty, and the unknown, right? Like, why are caves scary? Because you don't know what's inside. It's like, so we don't know, we're at the top of, like, I feel like when I was a little kid, when you rode a roller coaster and you crawl up to the top of the first drop, right? It's like tuk, 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 and there's the 2 American flags at the top if you like if you're like here in Coney Island, and then it's like, okay, now hang on, because right now we're right at the 2 American flags and we're off. And so who knows, this could end up being incredibly breathtakingly normal. And it could end up looking a lot like, George H.W. Bush reboot, where there's the usual attempt to cut Social Security, which ends up being stupid, and, the trickle-down economics crap that Republicans always try to do, and not much really gets done on the foreign policy front. It could really be like that. I don't know. This is a very different Donald Trump, I think, than took office naively in 2017, and he was pretty ineffectual from his point of view during his first term. So he's learned a lot. That's the thing about Mao said, fail again, better, right? And Donald Trump, if you look at his business history, he failed repeatedly, but he always learned from his failures, like all successful entrepreneurs. He's an entrepreneur, and this political project of his is like, it's like a casino. It's a project that he's trying to figure out, like, okay, I know what I messed up last time. Should have told them that mail-in voting was a good idea, right? I should have bragged about Operation Warp Speed, etc. So he's going to learn from those things. There's going to be new things that come up that he was not able to anticipate. I guess my point is, I'm not worried, but we do. I mean, I'm not more worried than usual. I don't think that, like, in the departure of the Biden administration means that we've lost, a bunch of extremely wise people who were at the helm of state, who really knew what they were doing, and like, oh no, without Tony Blinken, the world will be less safe. I don't believe that at all. The question is, will the world be any safer under Marco Rubio? I don't know, but it's an unknown. It's an unknowable unknown, right? Is this guy, is he a lame duck? I mean, kind of, but is it also a restoration? Isn't really quite a lame duck. It seems to indicate, something close to a mandate, even though he only won by 1.5 points. So I'm just,
that's true.
It's hard to say.
That's true. With one exception that I would make, or caveat I would make to it, is that under normal circumstances, Republicans never win the popular vote. Like, I mean, that goes back to George W. Bush, and part of the reason it was this thought that they were never going to win it in the future. The Democrats were like, well, we have demographics on our side. We are demographically going to be able to just run the roost going forward. And then you have Donald Trump winning the popular vote, which, is kind of a shocking thing that he was able to do so. And so, yeah, I agree with you. It feels like a mandate just because under normal circumstances, a Republican wouldn't win it. Like, it takes demographic shifts in order for a Republican to win the election, let alone the popular vote. So, no, I agree with you. I agree with everything you said. It's not like we've had wise men that are leaving office. These people were horrible. I mean, there was polling that recently came out from CNN that pointed out that only, right here, 33% of Americans express a favorable view of the Democratic Party. That's astonishing.
It's bad.
33% of Americans express a favorable view of the Democratic Party. Now, it's not that the Republican Party is massively better. When you look at the other polling, and I'll show this just so people can see what I'm looking at. Right here. If you look at the other polling, 75% of Democrats are disappointed in the way things are going, basically government. 70% are frustrated. 55% are burnt out. 40% are angry. 30% are optimistic. And then you get into single digits of people who are inspired or proud. Think about that. And then when you look at the Republicans, it's basically the same. 7% are proud, which, again, that's astonishingly low. 9% are inspired. I don't know who these people are. But even if you look at the Republican Party, 67% are disappointed. 65% are frustrated. 40% are burnt out. Like, how does a government have numbers like this and expect to function long term? It just seems like something is on the horizon to change. But like, it feels like something needs to change when you have that many people in the country looking for something different. So I agree with you. I'm trying to remain optimistic just because of how bad Joe Biden was. I'm trying to remain optimistic looking at this. By the way, Donald Trump has given a time of reprieve for TikTok. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know how long this is going to last, but apparently, because at this point, all of the legislation has come through saying TikTok is banned. You got the president signing it, that TikTok is banned. You get the Supreme Court to ratify it, saying TikTok is banned. And you get Trump saying, yeah, I'm not going to allow that to go through. Basically, I'm going to get Bondi, my attorney general, to just not pay attention to that. Just give it a pass. And so TikTok has been reactivated. It was supposed to go dark on the 19th. I believe it did go dark on the 19th. But now applications are now allowing it, like app stores. TikTok has come out thanking the President Trump. Now the catch becomes, what does it mean going forward? And what is Trump thinking about it like this? Meaning, if the goal is to get TikTok to sell to a company, that's not going to happen. They've already pointed out that's not going to happen. And in fact, I go further. Rand Paul was in a debate on this very specific issue. And there are days, man, that I love Rand Paul. I want to get your take on what he's saying here. This is Rand Paul. Well, I want to get your take on two things. One, the fact that they were trying to get TikTok at all, effectively the greatest First Amendment violation in the history of this country. But two, the credit that 170 million Americans are going to give to Donald Trump, basically half of America, for reinstating it, as opposed to the Democratic Party, because it was a Democratic president that killed it. This is Rand Paul.
Most important fact of all of this, and it needs to be debated, not assumed as a fact. The company is owned 60% by international investors, 20% by the two Chinese software engineers who developed it, the entrepreneurs who began the business, and 20% by their employees, 7,000 of whom are American. So it's a very diverse ownership. It's not owned by the Chinese government. Allegations against a company owned by Americans, and you have to prove it in court.
Who owns that company? Who owns that company? ByteDance. ByteDance is owned by China.
No, it's not. See, that's a lie. And you're defaming the country. You're defaming the company. 60% of it is owned by international investors. 20% is owned by the software developers who are Chinese, and 20% is owned by the employees, 7,000 of whom are Americans. So
who controls the algorithm?
But it's not owned by the government.
It's not about profits. Who owns the algorithm?
TikTok owns their own algorithm, and it's actually not in China.
TikTok? ByteDance. And who owns ByteDance? The Chinese government.
No, they don't. See, you've just told a lie, Brian. You can't say on TV.
I love that clip because Rand Paul is trying to point out to him, dude, you are literally trying to kill a company, and you are claiming that your justification for killing the company is that it's owned by the Chinese government. It is not. It's owned by a company. And then he breaks down like even the demographics of who owns it. Like 20% is owned by the people, like the people who work there, which I didn't know. There's international investors. I think he said 6%, another 20% owned by two developers that basically built it. But his point is, this is not the Chinese government. Mm-hmm. This is a company. Mm-hmm. And you guys are using this notion that the Chinese government owns TikTok, because in their mind, the Chinese government owns anything that's coming out of China, which is not necessarily true any more than the U.S. government owns anything that's coming out of the U.S. Right. Give me your take on this. Like, what is going to be the take of 170 million Americans that Donald Trump is the one that comes in and TikTok is giving him credit for saving TikTok for the time being? And even give me your take on this notion of them trying to kill it in the first place.
Well, let me start with the second one. I find it very disturbing, to be honest, that that Congress passed this legislation in a bipartisan fashion, overwhelmingly, without presenting any evidence in public to the American people that there was any threat to them whatsoever. And also, I find it even more disturbing that the United States Supreme Court voted unanimously to support it. And the reasoning was lies. The reasoning was that that there's no First Amendment rights attributable to a foreign entity. Well, I mean, first of all, the users there are millions, 175 million Americans are users, but that's not even true. Even if this company was owned by the Chinese Communist Party, if they're doing business in the United States, and let's say everybody in the United States who uses it is an undocumented, illegal, criminal, felon migrant, they all have First Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution. If you're a human being who lives and breathes, and you're anywhere in an area controlled by the U.S. government, you are covered by the Bill of Rights. And for the Supreme Court to say that's not true goes to a fundamental misreading, misinterpretation of like the basics of the constitutional system going back to 1789. I thought it was just absolutely gobsmacking, as the Brits say, that like they did this. And I know that that basically they're counting on the fact that this is a youth-oriented site and that it's known for silly dances. And they figure just knowing people like, the olds, the norms like me wouldn't care because we don't use it. And it's like, well, I mean, okay, I do care because I know how these things go. It's a slippery slope argument. I mean, it's they start with, this is a Martin Niemöller thing. They're going to start with, they come for your TikTok first. Eventually they're going to come for, your X. They're going to come for, and it's never going to stop. Yep. I'm not, there is, and also it's a massive distraction, as some friends of mine have pointed out, right? I mean, which major, huge international government spy agency is scraping and stealing all Americans' personal information? Well, maybe China, but I know because of a guy named Snowden that it's the U.S. government, right?
Yep.
And it's like, so like my information is already at Langley, and it's in a massive data farm in the middle of the desert in Nevada. And the NSA and the DIA and all these like alphabet soup agencies can get into it and do get into it whenever they feel like it. That's terrifying to me. I'm not really sure that President Xi has any designs on Ted Rall, but I'm more worried about the NSA having designs on Ted Rall. So, and I think you should be too. So it's like sort of the whole thing is just in terms of the rescue of it. I don't think Donald Trump personally cares about TikTok or the free speech angle, but he recognizes an opportunity when he sees one. That this is 175 million people. It's like the scene in the original Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, where the mayor of New York is told you have to shell out $1 million from your personal bank accounts to pay for the hostages. And he's like, $1 million? What am I going to get for that? He's like, 24 sure votes. And it's like, this is what Donald Trump is going to get out of it. He's going to get some votes and some support. And and sort of going back to your big question, and when we first started talking a few minutes ago, to me, what am I hoping for? I'm hoping that Donald Trump, the opportunist, is front and center, and he sees the opportunity to be like, how do I want to be remembered? I think he's thinking about that in a big way, or a bigly way. And I'm hoping that he's the kind of like Nixon goes to China kind of thing. Like, I could fix this healthcare thing that has people whacking CEOs in the streets. I could, like, in a way that neither the Democrats or previous Republicans could do. Maybe I can, reach out to North Korea again and like see if we can bring that, or Iran, and have talks there, and and calm the whole Middle East, get a Nobel Peace Prize. He has a lot of opportunities to do these things. And, of course, obviously, I'm a leftist, so I'm self-interested in those kind of things. But, he might be able to also get some stuff done that really benefit corporate America. I mean, the point is he's got a lot of opportunity right now. He's never going to have as much political capital in his life. He's got basically 9 months to do everything, and
he has carte blanche.
That's it.
I mean, he comes across far more centered than he did the first time around, and the Democrats come across beaten. Like the first time around, they were screaming. They were like howler monkeys. Oh, Trump in Russia. Trump peed on a prostitute. Trump did all of this stuff. And they were able to basically have all of these investigations into his administration, which crippled his administration going, for the first 2-3 years. I don't get that sense now. I get the sense that they've been beaten back, that they are in this kind of weird space where they don't even know who they are, and they're reconciling themselves with the fact that the overwhelming majority of the country hates them, that they're out of sync with the overwhelming majority of America. That it's a different. It seems different. It feels different. I can't.
It does.
I have a hard time articulating it, but the feeling is there where it feels like it's a different administration, and he feels more centered, and he feels like he won more. And maybe,
although he said some pretty crazy stuff about, threatening to go to war with Canada.
Well, that too, right? He escalates to de-escalate, especially in cases where he believes that these people are vassals and they can't do anything about it. But it just comes across more centered and maybe that's why it feels like a mandate, because it feels like he won something. Like he won against all the odds, against all the investigations,
Oh
against
my
the criminal
God.
indictments, against somebody putting a bullet in him or his ear. Yeah, it feels different to me.
By the way, I don't know if you heard this, Jamal, because you've been on the air, but it broke while you were talking right before I came on that Biden is these preemptive pardons. Biden just issued a bunch of preemptive pardons to Anthony Fauci and a bunch of other people in case Trump goes after him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So
I want to play a clip. Well, one of the reasons that they got rid of TikTok also was because of Israel, the conflict. Like, I could show the clip for
Liz Cheney also. Sorry.
Liz Cheney. Right. Oh, he gave a pardon to Liz Cheney?
Yeah.
What was Liz Cheney up for prosecution for?
Well, she wasn't. It's all preemptive, just like Fauci. It's sort of like a get out of jail free card.
How weird.
I mean, I never heard of a preemptive presidential pardon before.
You could give them. It's just weird.
In case you did something wrong and they catch you. I mean, maybe she killed someone. Who knows?
You find out she has a body in the truck that you can't touch
totally.
For. So, okay, we've talked about TikTok. Yeah, I don't know what it still sounds like he's going to try to get them to sell. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case. He may, like you said, crowd surf. And TikTok has already shown that they're willing to go dark, meaning they're willing to just say, okay, well, we're not doing this. Call it a day. And let's see how you fare politically for doing so. I hope you're right that some of this stuff is crowd surfing, where he sees, okay, I'm getting a lot of credit from 170 million people for saving this application. Again, I don't know how he's going to do that, though. The moment that somebody brings a lawsuit against them, they're going to fine against the president on this kind of presidential purview, but we'll see. I mean,
because there's no legal basis for this, right? I mean,
zero.
It requires. Well, I mean, the workaround is a new act of Congress, right? That's the workaround,
which Congress doesn't seem inclined to do.
Yeah, but I imagine Trump will try that. That would be the first, the path of least resistance, really.
Well, I think he's thinking about, okay, we'll give him a 90-day extension and we'll try to find some way to sell the company, which again, TikTok is not going to do.
No.
He has been having this conversation with Xi Jinping. He apparently called them yesterday. He's apparently looking for a call for Vladimir Putin with the idea of meeting up at some point. So he has been moving, and apparently he has a ton of executive orders that he's going to pass on day one, like as soon as he gets inaugurated. So he is coming in this with a clear idea on what he's trying to accomplish, whether he can accomplish it.
Something more than Biden did. And that's the big difference, right?
Yeah.
This is the first presidency that we've seen in a long time where there's intentionality, where this is this is like, okay, I'm going to be president. I'm going to be a strong president. I have an agenda. I'm going to push it. I mean, we haven't really seen that. I don't know, in a long, long time, right? I mean, I was going to say Obama, but not.
Well, he wanted Obamacare, but that's the closest thing I can think to it.
And that was it. He wasn't even that enthusiastic about it, really.
Yeah, right. He just said, I'm gonna let Congress do it.
Right.
Whereas Trump is like, I'm coming in with executive orders. I have a clear, and was talking to his caucus on how to get that stuff accomplished and how to get it through. So
I think you have to go back to 1981 and Ronald Reagan, the Reagan Revolution. There was an agenda. I remember it vividly. I was 18 years old. It was like, massive cuts to student financial aid, massive budget cuts, trickle down economics, a harder take against the Soviet Union. It was like there was an agenda. I hated that agenda, but there was an agenda. I think for the last 45 years, Americans have been living under people whose main ambition in becoming president was that they wanted to become president. And then once they took that oath of office, pretty much they'd accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. That's not the case here.
Yeah, he has clear ideas on what he wants to accomplish. Something that Mike Johnson said, there are a few things that came out. The notion that Blinken, according to the New York Times, Blinken was overriding the defense, the Secretary of Defense. Now, this was something that seemed to be true, but there was no confirmation on it, that there was this kind of push and pull where you got Milley wasn't Secretary of Defense, but let's say the Pentagon. Milley or is it Millie? I think
Millie.
Millie. Yeah. So Millie was like, yeah, there needs to be a negotiated settlement on this. This is not something that Ukraine can win. Where Blinken is like, war, more war. And they effectively overriding what the Pentagon wanted on the issue of Ukraine, which of course is more relevant now since they're trying to send their kids and 500,000 Ukrainians have been killed. And so it's like Blinken was kind of pushing for war. The other issue that came out was Mike Johnson. Well, there was also Zelensky who wanted to go to the inauguration and wasn't allowed. He asked like 3 times and he kept being shot down on it. But Mike Johnson pointed out that he went to see Joe Biden on, I think it was LNG sanctions, or at the very least an executive order on LNG that Joe Biden initiated. He points out that Joe Biden had no memory of sanctions. Oh, I'm sorry, of the executive order that he put forward. And I'm trying to find the clip. I just had that thing up. But give me your take on that, if that's true. And I did point out, it's
I believe it.
true. So right here. So he points out that Joe Biden was out of his mind, that Joe Biden literally could not remember signing an executive order on the issue of LNG.
President, you did. It was an executive order.
Further into this.
Well, I mean, it's public now because the Wall Street Journal got it and put it on the front page. But January a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I had been asked. I became speaker in October 2023, and there were all sorts of big national security concerns and everything going on. And I started requesting a meeting with the president because, you know, I'm kind of old school. I'm a constitutional law guy. Speaker of the House should be able to talk to the president, especially in times of great national interest and calamity. But they wouldn't let me meet with him, and his staff kept giving me excuses. This went on for like 8 or 9 weeks. I'm sorry,
wow.
He doesn't have time. What are you talking about? I'm second in line of the presidency. He has time. I need to talk to him.
Now, real quick, to be clear, this does fall in line with the reporting where they said that Joe Biden was being managed from day one, where they would change his schedule, alter his schedule, push meetings to different days when Joe Biden wasn't quite in his right mind. Let's keep going.
We had, I can't say the classified parts, but we had some big national concerns at the time that I was losing sleep over. Finally, I just went to the Hill Press Corps and I said, the president is not being allowed to meet with the speaker. There's a problem. So they started putting pressure on him. Long story short, they finally relented. They invited me to the White House. I show up and I realize it's actually an ambush because it's not just me and the president. It's also Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem, you know, the CIA director, everybody. And then so I walked in the Oval and, I know what this is. They're going to hotbox the speaker on Ukraine funding. That's what it was. This is probably 3rd week of January. We sit down, we're in the midst of it, and the whole conversation, and I'm going, we don't need to have this conversation. The president reaches over just like this. We're sitting right next to the fireplace in the Oval, and he grabs my arm and he says, Speaker and I just need a couple minutes together. Would y'all just leave us alone? And I looked up on the faces of some of the staff standing around the wall, and they're like, oh, no, he did it. So he called it. He's the commander-in-chief. So everybody leaves, and he and I are standing awkwardly in the middle of the Oval Office right over the rug by that coffee table. And I said, Mr. President, thanks for the moments. This is very important. I got some big national security things I need to talk to you about that I've heard, and I think you know, and what do we do? But first, real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? I cannot answer this from my constituents in Louisiana. Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, And he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order, 3 weeks ago. And he goes, no, I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. And he goes, oh, you talk about natural gas. Yes, sir. He said, no, you misunderstand. He said, what I did is I signed this thing we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, you're not, sir. You paused it. I know. I have the export terminals in my state. I talked to those people.
Joe Biden did not remember signing the document for that quote unquote pause of that executive order on the LNG exports. And Mike Johnson says he walks out that meeting terrified for the country, believing that there is nobody running the country. That is astonishing. Like that is
It's
floor,
bad.
like fall out your chair, astonishing. And it falls in line with the reporting that Joe Biden and his staff was effectively trying to manage Joe Biden. And so when he points out that all of those people in the rooms, their eyes got big, like, oh my God, he's going to talk to him by himself. But again, it falls in line with what the staff was saying. Give me your take on that. That is appalling if that's true.
Well, especially the part, and I think it's preceded by that opening part where Speaker Johnson says that he was given the brush off for 8 to 9 weeks. Weeks. I mean, when the Speaker of House of Representatives wants to talk to the President of the United States, he should at least be able to pick up the phone and talk to him,
Agreed.
the same day.
Yeah.
And probably an in-person meeting should not be out of the question, at least within, say, 48 hours. That is, it's crazy that he talked about that. Obviously, they were expecting to not be able to not leave the two of them alone, right?
Mhm.
And if they had known that, I guess they would have briefed Biden on what he had signed. Clearly, what they've been doing is they've been shoving papers in front of Biden. And they're like, sign this, sign this, sign this, sign this, and then you can go off and have your nap. That's been what they're doing. I mean, they've been pumping up a stuffed corpse basically as president for 4 years. And I got to tell you, what I'm afraid of is that this administration and the Republicans coming in who control the House are not going to conduct a full investigation, which we need. We need a Warren Commission or 9/11 Commission type investigation with sweeping, broad investigatorial powers that's going to be able to get to the bottom of what, what did the president know and when did he know it, or did he know anything for the last 4 years? I'm worried they're not going to do it for a simple self-serving reason that they may find themselves in the same position in 1 or 2 or 3 years, and they don't want to establish the precedent that that's a problem. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am, though. I think this is going to be swept under the rug. I think it would be, if Donald Trump were 42, we'd be seeing that investigation. And it's, the American people deserve to know exactly how they did this, and the people who were behind it should face charges of some sort. I mean, it's some kind of treason. I mean, it is. To tell people like this is the president, but he's not making any decisions, or not making all the decisions. Let's say that. So, they would have, if they'd known he was going to be one-on-one with Johnson, they would have told him, "Oh, sorry, you signed the LNG thing." That they didn't expect him to be alone with Johnson after 9 weeks. I mean, that's terrifying.
Yeah, just shocking. I saw that. Like the notion that the president is out of his mind, or he can't even remember what he signed. Like that just shouldn't happen.
That's not LBJ. When you read Caro on LBJ famously could like buttonhole a senator and by heart say like, on SB 74. Page 17, paragraph 7, subparagraph D4. Hey, can you switch but to and? And it's like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Can you switch but to and? Yeah, that means that there's a question of who was running the White House, and it sounds like it was Sullivan, Blinken, Kirby. It sounded like these people were the ones that were the main proponents in the movement. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't doubt that Joe Biden had. Let's say an ideology, and that ideology will push in a particular direction. So on big stuff, he may know no peace deal, or he may know I don't want to go to war with Russia, with NATO going to war. Like he may know big stuff, but it seems like the grain
broad strokes.
Yeah, very broad strokes. It seems like the day-to-day functioning was purely under the auspices of other people, and God, man, that's a horrible look. That is a horrible, horrible look. Do you think, like, that there has been any level of soul searching in the Democratic Party on this stuff? And the reason I ask this, and I know when I ask the question, I ask it with a certain smirk. When I ask this question, I'm going to play this, and then I want to get your take on it to follow up with that particular question. Listen to what this guy says here, because I hear this and I think to myself, they are fundamentally missing the point. They don't.
There are a lot of good billionaires out there that have been with Democrats who share our values, and we will take their money, but we're not taking money from those bad billionaires.
Ted, they're not taking money from the bad billionaires. He totally nailed it. He finally figured it out. It's the good billionaires, the bad billionaires. Elon Musk of the world are apparently the bad billionaires, but we, the Democratic Party, are going to associate with the good billionaires. Talk about missing the point. I hear that and I think to myself, you guys are fundamentally, you don't get it. What people want is like, for example, Kamala Harris. One of the reporting came out that like 20 million people didn't show up for Harris because of Gaza, because of the war. A position that the Democratic Party took, whereas Donald Trump took the opposite position, saying, I'm going to end the war, getting the Muslim community to come out, not just vote for him, but got on stage in order to advocate for him. Whereas the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris was like, we're not going to change policy. I'm going to stick with what we've been doing. And no, I wouldn't have done anything different with the Biden administration. I don't get the sense that Trump would allow himself to be humiliated in the way that Joe Biden was humiliated by Netanyahu. And on something like this, where you get the large share of Democrats saying we want money out of politics because it's not to our benefit, and it's not. Meaning, this argument that Chuck Schumer was making, that for every progressive that we lose, we'll gain a moderate Republican. Okay, well, that didn't happen. And you're getting the overwhelming majority of the public hating you, believing that your party is massively out of sorts. And so, like, the Democratic Party philosophically is a workers' party. And yet, you have a party that is catering to the 1%. So a party that is supposed to be, let's say, lean towards the working class, they are getting money from the owner class, which on some level is going to control the politics and be, by definition, at the very least, not necessarily the most beneficial to the working class. They miss the point. They miss the boat philosophically. Give me a take on this. Do you see any movement, any level of recognition, of cognizance that something fundamentally needs to change in leadership, not in just the population?
No, I've been watching with great interest all of for postmortems in all the usual places like Politico, The Hill, Washington Post, New York Times editorial pages, and they're nowhere to be found. In fact, just over the weekend there was some piece in the New York Times, I forget who authored it, who basically saying that maybe the Democratic Party should stop trying to get the middle class and double down on coastal elites. I'm thinking, well, you better study that electoral college map a little more carefully. But I mean, what I'm hearing over and over again from Democrats and, and I mean mainly the leadership cast and the analyst cast of the Democrats who decide these things, is that this was a messaging problem, that Kamala lost not because the message was bad, the ideology was bad or unpopular, or that the image of the party was bad or unpopular, but because basically the voters didn't get it. Like they didn't, it was kind of like, no, like, honey, I'm an awesome husband. I'm so great. All those nights that I work late, no, I really am just working late for us and the kids, and to get that overtime. It's not because my secretary is super hot and there's a motel down the street at all. So it's like, it's the messaging, and they really think that. They really think we need better propaganda. And I mean, look, propaganda is super important. You do need, and it's true that if you have good policies, it's going to be hard you still have to message them. That's true. But I don't think that's what happened here. I think they're just wrong. I think the propaganda was actually pretty effective. I think they did the best they could with what they had. They had a presidency that really only had one major accomplishment, which was an infrastructure bill that didn't have any results yet because it's going to take 10 years for that money to turn into roads and bridges. And that's it. So they had that. They had the old president. They had the old president who dropped out because, we've been lying to you for 4 years about his mental health. We've got Kamala Harris, the mean girl prosecutor who likes to send, people of color to death row, and then knows it and doesn't do anything about it. They had problems. They really did, and the voters were pissed off about inflation and the border. They just were. Honestly, these all could have been solved if I'd been advising Kamala Harris. I would have said like, well, you can solve these problems. You can say, I'm going to have a different border policy. I'm going to have, this is my inflation plan. I get it. That wasn't me. That was Joe. She didn't do any of that stuff.
She won't do it.
Terrible candidate. I don't know to what extent she was being leaned on, by the DNC. I always got the sense that she knew the Israel policy was a dog and that it was going to cost her, but it was kind of like one of those, like, don't change that. She was being told, but I'm making that up. I don't know. I'm speculating, but it's,
she said she still worked for Joe Biden and she didn't want to pull herself away from her principle.
Well, they told her, they probably told her, like, don't run away, like the way Al Gore ran away from Bill Clinton after Monica Lewinsky. Don't make that mistake. But this was a different situation. History doesn't repeat, it rhymes. I would have just said, you got to run away from Joe Biden, really. But the point is that, like, they don't get it at all. If they had to do this all over again, they would do it exactly the same way. They view the voters as an inconvenience. The voters are the pain in the ass that's preventing them from getting the victories that they richly deserve. And inexplicably, this maniac, Donald Trump, is being supported by the idiot voters who are too stupid to know better. That's what they think. And it's like, these are the voters. Don't disrespect the voters. Without the voters, you're nothing. So this is about, you have to view, like, Coke, like, it's not like, I don't think Pepsi, looks at Coke and says, the people are stupid. That's why they prefer Coke to Pepsi. I think Pepsi's like, we gotta up our game, right? So, but it's like, but these guys really, the Democrats, they really think it's a messaging problem. Don't you think, Jamal? They just think they're doing everything great. They just need to get the word out.
Look, I would tell you, every Democrat that I've spoken to, maybe one or two, in their point of view, Kamala Harris was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
People were just sexist and bigoted. They didn't quite get her. Like, that was the way that they were viewing it and the way that they were looking at it. And I agree with you. Everything that I've heard up to this point was the messaging was poor. There was poor messaging. We just need to message better. And they've said as much. You get every blue moon with a Carville, where Carville will say something to the effect of, he's like, look, I'm in the dark. I don't know what is going on. But something needs to be different. Something needs to change. But yeah, I give him credit for it. I definitely give him credit for it, where he's like, something needs to be changed. He said, we made a mistake by focusing on Donald Trump. It's the economy.
Everyone saw coming. Don't focus on the other guy.
They didn't.
Focus on your guy or lady.
They didn't. Because from their point of view, Donald Trump is just so grotesque that he is obviously grotesque. And because he is obviously grotesque, we just need to point out, well, hey, he's a felon. He's a,
Well, if he's obviously grotesque, then you don't need to say it. Let the voters just notice that on their own.
They felt that if they bang that hammer, and if they bang the hammer hard enough, that the public would just agree with them. Like, and the Democratic Party also has this other weird thing of, they believe that they're fundamentally right, that they're more moral, that they're more just, that they're more ethical, that they have some kind of high ground that I have no idea why they believe that they have. But that framing makes it very difficult for you to accept that you're wrong. It just is. Like, it makes it, if I believe that I am like moral and ethical and correct and so, then how do I ever come to a consensus or conclusion that I'm getting something wrong in something of my framing and my point of view? I really get the sense that whether it's Harris, whether it's Joe Biden, it's like, I'm giving you the privilege of voting for me in order to avoid a Trump presidency. So you should,
by the way, Kamala Harris, she had some headwinds to deal with, but she had one huge advantage that nobody ever talks about, which is she had a dry run in the form of Hillary Clinton. Hey, we ran a lady against the same guy, Donald Trump, 8 years ago, and basically she lost, and you can study her campaign and not repeat her mistakes. Not many people run for president of the United States with that ability to have the dry run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it was kind of like Richard Nixon, 1968. Oh, it's like, okay, I screwed up in 1960. Here's what I could do better. Well, it's like she had that. I mean, she could learn from Hillary. She didn't learn from Hillary. The Democrats literally ran a 2016 campaign all over again. They did exactly the same thing, down to the "I'm with her" slogan.
Let me ask you this: Do you think this is an ideological issue, or do you think this is a financial issue? And what I mean by that is, do you think, from their point of view, they look at it as like Chuck Schumer did, where Chuck Schumer was like, it is a pain in the ass to cater to progressives, because progressives want stuff. They want healthcare, they want education, they want unemployment benefits, they want the expansion of Social Security, they want all of these things that we are going to have a difficult time arguing for under the model to which we operate. And that model being, we take massive amounts of money. For God's sake, Kamala Harris got $1.5 billion to run that race. And so in their framing of things, it is far easier to work with moderate Republicans, or for that matter, let's say people who are like the Mansions of the world, who don't really care about those things. They care about other things. And we can be focusing on social policy and be more, let's say, to the right on economic policy. And we can create a coalition like that. Meaning, from their point of view, it is a pain in the ass to try to get those things under the model to which they operate in regards to you get a lot of cash and you run your election with cash. Billionaires or millionaires are not going to care about healthcare and education. They already can afford those things. And so the fact that progressives continuously push and agitate for that stuff is a continuous pain in the ass for the party. Do you think it's that? Or do you think it's more ideological? And I guess I'm asking, is it self-interest? Or is it this kind of ideological framing in the way that they function, believing that we're more moral, we're better? Give me your take on this. We have about a minute left.
I think it is, look, I think those two things, the ideology and the fundraising model that they've established starting in the early 90s, that Bernie has criticized, that going for the corporate contributions, that those things are self-reinforcing. It's kind of like when you put out a newspaper every day, you kind of like just come in and put out the newspaper every day. This is what Democrats do. It's like they have decided that it's easier to get big corporate contributions, and therefore they have to have an ideology that matches it. And because they have an ideology that matches it, only people who have that ideology tend to rise up in the ranks of the Democratic Party. And so then there's no one else at the table. So it's a self-reinforcing system. I think that's exactly what happens, even though it's not working, right? Clearly it's not working. But that's what they're used to, and they believe in it, right? To a certain extent. I also think, maybe 15% of it, 20% of it is, it's a matter of temperament. It's psychological. They literally, the types of people who are willing to have an ideology that is so accommodationist and what's the word I'm looking for? What do they call progressives? They always call us people who are purists.
Yeah.
They say like, the purity brigade, right? But what's the opposite of someone who has a pure ideology? It's someone who doesn't. Right? Someone who is completely just focused on, just getting through the day, but they don't actually want to change things. Well, those people, they kind of are suffering from a psychological, cognitive dissonance, right? You're a politician who doesn't really want anything other than power, but you don't want power like, say, LBJ wanted power to push through the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's, and I think when you're like that, you tend to sort of just, you block, you're wrong, kind of, you're kind of like not a good person or as good a person as you could be. So you tend to be like, la, 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 I can't hear you. They're really, they can't listen to us because they know we're right.
Yeah. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, one of my favorite people to talk to. I'm a great friend of this show. Also, host of the TMI, Too Much Information show that starts 10 a.m., 12 p.m. Definitely check him out. He starts immediately after the show on YouTube with the great Manila Chan. Thank you, Ted. Thank you for this,
Thank
man.
you, Gerard. It was so fun. Take care.
Be safe, man.
Have a good show.
All right.